I'm 30 years old, and there's one sentence that has haunted me longer than any other. You're not part of this family. My mother said those words to me when I was 16, standing in our cramped kitchen in Cleveland, Ohio. The fluorescent light above us flickered. It always did, casting harsh shadows across her face as she looked at me with that familiar expression of disappointment and exhaustion. I remember every detail of that moment. The smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air, the sound of my younger siblings arguing in the living room over the remote control, the way my mother's voice carried no emotion, as if she was simply stating a fact rather than crushing her daughter's heart. You're not part of this family, Sarah. You never have been. Those words didn't come out of nowhere. They were the culmination of years of feeling like an outsider in my own home. I was the eldest of 4 children, but somehow I was always the one who didn't belong, while my siblings, Marcus, who was 2 years younger, and the twins, Lisa and Laura, who were 8 years younger, seemed to effortlessly earn my mother's affection. I was treated like a burden she couldn't wait to shed. Growing up in our small 2-bedroom house on the east side of Cleveland, I learned early that love was conditional. My mother, Janet, worked double shifts at the local diner, coming home exhausted and irritable. My father had left when I was 12, and with him went any semblance of stability our family had. But even before he left, I felt like I was living on the periphery of my own life. The favoritism was subtle at first. Marcus got new clothes, while I wore hand-me-downs from church donations. When Lisa and Laura were born, they became the center of everyone's universe. The miracle twins, who brought joy back to our broken home. I became the built-in babysitter, the one responsible for making sure everyone else was okay, while my own needs went unnoticed. Sarah, watch your brother. Sarah, the twins are crying. Sarah, why can't you be more helpful? It was always my fault when things went wrong, never my achievement when things went right. I learned to make myself small, to anticipate everyone's needs before they voiced them, hoping that if I was useful enough, maybe I'd finally earn my place at the table. But that night in the kitchen, when I was 16 and had just gotten my first job at the local grocery store, I made the mistake of asking if I could keep some of my paycheck for myself. I wanted to buy a dress for the school dance, something that was mine, something that made me feel pretty for once. My mother's reaction was swift and brutal. You think you deserve something special. You think you're better than the rest of us. Her voice rose with each word, and I could see years of resentment bubbling to the surface. You've been nothing but a drain on this family since the day you were born. You eat our food, you live under our roof, and you have the audacity to ask for more. I tried to explain that I just wanted one thing for myself, that I'd been working hard and thought maybe I could have just a small portion of what I earned. But she cut me off with those words that would echo in my mind for the next 14 years. You're not part of this family. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus had stopped watching TV and was standing in the doorway, his face a mixture of shock and guilt. The twins, only 8 years old, were peering around the corner with wide, confused eyes. But no one said anything. No one defended me. No one told my mother she was wrong. That night, I lay in my bed, a mattress on the floor of the closet-sized room I shared with the twins, and made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I would prove her wrong. I would become someone, make something of myself, and show her that I was worth more than she ever imagined. From that moment forward, I threw myself into everything with fierce determination. I excelled in school, working part-time jobs to pay for my own supplies and clothes. I applied for every scholarship available, spending my evenings in the public library because it was quieter than home and had better lighting for studying. I learned to cook, to manage money, to navigate the world without asking for help from anyone. My mother watched my transformation with a mixture of suspicion and grudging respect. She never apologized for what she said, never acknowledged the pain she'd caused. If anything, my success seemed to irritate her more. "Sarah thinks she's so smart," she'd mutter to the neighbors. "Sarah thinks she's better than where she came from." But I wasn't trying to be better than anyone. I was trying to survive. I was trying to build a life where I mattered, where my voice was heard, where I belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was a world I had to create entirely on my own. The day I graduated high school as valedictorian, my mother didn't come to the ceremony. She said she had to work, but I knew she could have asked for the time off. Marcus was there, though, sitting awkwardly in the back row, clapping when I walked across the stage. It meant more to me than I could express at the time. That fall, I left Cleveland with a full scholarship to Ohio State University, a duffel bag of belongings, and a heart full of mixed emotions. I was excited about my future, but I was also leaving behind everything I'd ever known, including the people who, despite everything, were still my family. College was a revelation. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence, ambition, and hard work. I made friends who appreciated my loyalty and determination. I discovered that I had a talent for business and finance, that I could look at complex problems and find solutions that others couldn't see. But even as I thrived academically and socially, those words from my mother continued to haunt me. In quiet moments, when I was alone in my dorm room or walking across campus, I'd hear her voice. "You're not part of this family." And despite all my success, despite all the evidence to the contrary, a part of me still believed it was true. I graduated with honors and landed a job at a financial consulting firm in Columbus. I was good at what I did, really good. I had a knack for helping small businesses restructure their debt and find paths to profitability. Within 5 years, I'd saved enough money to start my own consultancy. And within another 5 years, I was running a successful firm with 12 employees and clients across the Midwest. I bought a beautiful house in a quiet suburb, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances. It was everything I dreamed of as a child, sharing a mattress on the floor with my sisters. I had a garden where I grew tomatoes and herbs, a reading nook by the window, where I spent Sunday mornings with coffee and books, and a guest room that I'd decorated with care, hoping someday I'd have visitors who mattered to me. But success, I learned, can be lonely. I dated occasionally, but I found it hard to trust people, hard to let them see the parts of me that were still broken. I'd built walls around my heart that were as strong as the business I'd created. I had colleagues who respected me, clients who trusted me, and a bank account that proved my worth. But I still felt like that 16-year-old girl standing in the kitchen, being told she didn't belong. I kept in touch with Marcus sporadically. He'd call every few months, usually when he needed money or advice. He'd never quite found his footing after high school, a series of dead-end jobs, a marriage that ended in divorce, a struggle with drinking that he managed to overcome but never fully escaped. He was a good man with a kind heart, but life had been hard on him in different ways than it had been on me. The twins, Lisa and Laura, were a different story. Now 22, they were both attending community college. While living at home with our mother, Lisa was studying to be a nurse, and Laura was pursuing a degree in elementary education. They were good girls, responsible and caring, but they'd been sheltered in ways I never was. They'd never had to fight for their place in the world, never had to question whether they were worthy of love. And my mother? She was still working at the diner, still living in the same house, still carrying herself with that particular brand of exhausted bitterness that had defined my childhood. We spoke maybe twice a year, birthdays and Christmas, conversations that were polite but distant, like acquaintances catching up rather than mother and daughter reconnecting. I thought I'd made peace with all of it. I thought I'd built a life separate from the pain of my past. I thought I was strong enough to carry those old wounds without letting them define me. But life has a way of bringing everything full circle, whether you're ready for it or not. The call came on a Tuesday in March. I was in my office, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the time, 2:30 in the afternoon. Marcus typically called in the evenings, after a few beers had loosened his tongue and made him nostalgic. "Sarah," his voice was shaky, almost whispered, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen." "Okay." I set down my pen and gave him my full attention. In the background, I could hear the distant sound of traffic and what might have been sobbing. "Marcus, where are you? What's wrong?" "I'm at the hospital. It's Mom." He paused, and I heard him take a deep, shuddering breath. "She had a stroke, Sarah. A bad one. They don't know if she's going to make it." The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything between us, she was still my mother, the woman who raised me, who fed me, who taught me to tie my shoes and ride a bike, the woman who also broke my heart more times than I could count. "When did this happen?" I asked, already reaching for my car keys. "This morning." Lisa found her when she came home from class. She was on the kitchen floor, conscious but unable to speak. The paramedics said she'd been there for hours. His voice broke. "God, Sarah, what if Lisa hadn't come home early? What if she'd been there all night?" I was already walking toward the elevator. "I'm coming. I'll be there in 2 hours." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." And I meant it. Whatever had happened between my mother and me, whatever words had been said or left unsaid, she was still family. Even if she'd told me I wasn't part of it, I couldn't abandon her when she needed help. The drive to Cleveland felt endless. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen her. 6 months earlier, at Christmas. She'd looked older, more fragile, but she'd still had that steel in her spine that had defined her for as long as I could remember. We'd made small talk about my business, about the twins' studies, about the weather, safe topics that kept us from venturing into dangerous territory. But now, as I navigated the familiar streets of my childhood, I realized how much I'd missed. When had she started looking so tired? When had her hair become more grey than brown? How long had she been struggling with health issues that none of us knew about? The hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. I found Marcus in the waiting room, his clothes wrinkled, his face pale and drawn. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since I'd seen him last. Lisa and Laura were there too, huddled together on uncomfortable plastic chairs, their eyes red from crying. "How is she?" I asked, taking the seat next to Marcus. "Stable, but critical. The stroke affected the left side of her brain. They're not sure yet how much function she'll recover." He rubbed his face with his hands. "The doctor said the next 48 hours are crucial." Lisa looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I should have checked on her earlier. I had a morning class, but I could have skipped it. I should have..." "Don't," I said firmly, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "This isn't your fault. None of it. This is anyone's fault." But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. Should I have stayed in closer touch? Should I have pushed past the awkwardness and distance to make sure she was okay? Had my pride and hurt feelings prevented me from being the daughter she needed? even if she'd never been the mother I'd wanted. We took turns sitting with her over the next few days. She was connected to machines that beeped and hummed, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat. Her face was slack on one side, her body small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. This was the woman who had seemed so formidable throughout my childhood, who had wielded her disappointment like a weapon. Now she looked like what she'd always been, a human being who'd done her best with limited resources and unlimited pain. On the third day, she woke up. Her eyes found mine first. Probably because I was the only one in the room at the time. She tried to speak, but only garbled sounds came out. The frustration in her eyes was heartbreaking. "It's okay," I said, taking her hand. "Don't try to talk yet. You're in the hospital. You had a stroke, but you're alive. You're going to be okay." She squeezed my hand, weakly, but definitely intentionally, and for the first time in 14 years, I felt like she was really seeing me, not as a disappointment or a burden, but as her daughter who had come when she needed help. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. With physical therapy and speech therapy, she might regain some of her function, but it would be a long road, and she'd need extensive care and support. The social worker assigned to her case was blunt about the options: a nursing home or family care with professional support. "I can't take care of her," Marcus said during one of our late-night family meetings in the hospital cafeteria. "I'm barely keeping myself together. I work construction. I'm gone 12 hours a day, and my apartment is a studio. There's no room, and I don't have the skills she needs." Lisa and Laura were willing, but impractical. They were both in school, both financially dependent on what little support our mother had been able to provide. They lived in her house, but it was her house, and her disability payments wouldn't cover private care. "There are some good facilities," the social worker had said, "places that specialize in stroke recovery. With her insurance and Medicare, it would be affordable." But I'd visited those places before when I was consulting for healthcare organizations. I knew what affordable meant: understaffed, underfunded, and overcrowded, places where people went to exist, not to heal. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about choices. I thought about the 16-year-old girl who had been told she wasn't part of the family. I thought about the 30-year-old woman who had built a successful life despite those words. And I thought about the 54-year-old woman lying in a hospital bed, vulnerable and scared, needing help from the daughter she'd pushed away. I made a decision that surprised even me. The next morning, I called my siblings together in the hospital waiting room. "I want to take her home with me," I said without preamble. "All of you. I want you all to come live with me while she recovers." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Lisa and Laura exchanged glances that I couldn't read. "Sarah," Marcus said finally, "you don't understand what you're offering. She's going to need round-the-clock care, physical therapy, speech therapy, help with basic daily activities. And it could take months, maybe years. I understand perfectly, and I did. I'd done my research, talked to the doctors, consulted with specialists. I knew exactly what I was signing up for. I have a big house, I have the financial resources to hire help, and I have time to coordinate her care." "But why?" Lisa asked, her voice small and confused. "After everything that happened between you two, why would you do this?" I looked at each of them. My brother, who had struggled but never given up. My sisters, who had been sheltered but were now facing harsh realities. And I thought about my mother, lying in that hospital bed, fighting for every breath, Because she's my mother, I said simply. And despite what she might have said years ago, I am part of this family. We all are. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Sarah, I can't ask you to do this. It's too much. You're not asking. I'm offering. I looked around at all of them. I'm offering all of you a home while we figure this out. Marcus, you can take time to get back on your feet. Lisa, Laura, you can finish your education without worrying about money or housing. And Mom can recover in a place where she's surrounded by people who love her. Do you love her? Laura asked quietly. After everything she put you through, it was a fair question, and it deserved an honest answer. I don't know, I admitted. I'm angry with her about a lot of things. But I love the idea of who she could have been, and I love who she might still become. Sometimes that's enough to start with. The arrangements took 2 weeks to coordinate. I had to hire a medical transport service to get my mother from Cleveland to Columbus. I converted my guest room into a hospital-style bedroom with an adjustable bed, monitoring equipment, and easy access to a bathroom. I interviewed and hired a live-in nurse named Patricia, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in stroke recovery. I also had to prepare my house for 3 additional people. The twins would share my office, which I converted into a bedroom. Marcus would take the basement, which I finished with a bathroom and sitting area. I moved my work setup to the dining room, turning it into a temporary office space. But the hardest, preparation was emotional. I had to ready myself for the possibility that bringing my family into my carefully constructed life might destroy the peace I'd worked so hard to build. I had to prepare for old wounds to be reopened, for conflicts I thought I'd resolved to resurface. The day they arrived was grey and drizzling, typical March weather in Ohio. I watched from my kitchen window as the medical transport van pulled into my driveway, followed by Marcus's truck loaded with boxes and furniture. My heart was pounding as Patricia and the transport team carefully moved my mother into the house. She was awake and alert, taking in her surroundings with eyes that seemed sharper than they'd been in the hospital. When they settled her into the bed I'd prepared, she looked directly at me and tried to speak. The words were still garbled, but I could make out what she was trying to say. Thank you. I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. Welcome home, Mom. As I said the words, I realized I meant them. This was her home now. This was their home. And maybe, just maybe, it could finally be mine too. The first month was chaos, pure, unfiltered chaos that tested every boundary I'd carefully constructed around my life. I'd thought I was prepared for the challenges of caring for someone recovering from a stroke, but I hadn't anticipated the emotional complexity of sharing my space with people who carried so much of my past. My mother, Janet, was frustrated by her limitations in ways that manifested as anger toward everyone around her. She couldn't form complete sentences, couldn't use her right hand effectively, and needed help with basic tasks that she'd taken for granted her entire adult life. Patricia, our nurse, was patient and professional, but even she struggled with my mother's stubborn refusal to participate in her prescribed exercises. She's scared, Patricia explained to me during one of our evening debriefs. Stroke patients often experience depression and anxiety. They're grieving the loss of their independence, their identity. Sometimes resistance is the only control they feel they have left. I understood the psychology, but living with it day after day was exhausting. My mother would throw her water cup when she couldn't grip it properly. She'd cry during physical therapy sessions, not from pain, but from frustration. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her making sounds that weren't quite words, but conveyed a depth of despair that broke my heart. Marcus was struggling in different ways. After years of living alone, he wasn't used to sharing space or coordinating schedules. He'd leave dishes in the sink, forget to replace empty toilet paper rolls, and blast music from the basement at inappropriate hours. But more than that, he was grappling with guilt over our mother's condition and his own inability to provide the care she needed. "I should be the one doing this," he said to me one evening, as we stood in the kitchen after dinner. "I'm her son. I should be the one taking care of her." "You are taking care of her," I replied, loading plates into the dishwasher. "You're here, you're helping, you're working to get back on your feet so you can contribute more. That matters." But I could see the pain in his eyes. The way he'd watch me coordinate medical appointments and insurance claims with the competence he felt he lacked. Our roles had reversed in ways that neither of us had anticipated. I'd become the responsible one, the caretaker, the person everyone turned to for solutions. He was trying to find his place in a dynamic that had shifted fundamentally. Lisa and Laura were adapting better, but they were facing their own challenges. They'd transferred to Columbus State Community College to continue their studies, which meant learning new systems, making new friends, and adapting to a different environment. They were also seeing their family and their mother in ways they never had before. "I never knew she was so," Lisa said to me one afternoon as we sat in the living room, watching our mother work with Patricia on speech exercises. She struggled for the right word. "Vulnerable," I suggested. "Yeah, she always seemed so strong, so in control. Seeing her like this," she trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. I understood. The twins had been protected from the harsher realities of our family life. They'd seen our mother as the center of their universe, the person who solved problems and provided stability. They'd never witnessed the moments of doubt, frustration, and pain that I'd grown up with. Now they were learning that strength and vulnerability often coexist in the same person. For me, the hardest part wasn't the practical challenges. I was good at managing logistics, at solving problems, at making things work. The hardest part was navigating the emotional minefield of our shared history while trying to build something new. My mother and I had to learn to communicate all over again. Her speech was improving slowly, but she still struggled to express complex thoughts. I found myself having to guess at her meanings, to interpret her frustrations, to anticipate her needs. It was intimate in a way our relationship had never been before. One evening, about 6 weeks after she'd moved in, she managed to string together a mostly coherent sentence during our usual evening routine of helping her prepare for bed. "Why you? Do this?" she asked, her words slow and deliberate. I was adjusting her pillows, and I paused, considering how to answer. "Because you're my mother," I said finally. She shook her head, frustration creeping into her expression. "No. Why you? Really?" I sat down in the chair beside her bed, the same chair where I'd spent countless hours over the past month, helping her with exercises, reading to her, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. "I don't know," I admitted. Maybe because I needed to prove something to myself. Maybe because I wanted to see if I could be better than the hurt I've been carrying around. Maybe because I finally realized that you did the best you could with what you had. She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words clearer than most she'd spoken since the stroke. It wasn't enough to erase years of pain, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that things between us had been broken, and maybe, just maybe, they could be repaired. But forgiveness, I was learning, isn't a single moment of decision. It's a daily choice, a practice that requires constant recommitment. There were days when old patterns reasserted themselves, when her frustration would manifest as criticism of my choices, my house, my life. There were moments when I felt 16 again, standing in that kitchen, absorbing the message that I wasn't enough. The difference now was that I had the tools to respond differently. I could see her criticism as a reflection of her own fear and frustration rather than an accurate assessment of my worth. I could set boundaries while still providing care. I could choose compassion without sacrificing my own emotional well-being. The breakthrough came during her 3rd month of recovery. She'd been working with a speech therapist twice a week, and her communication was improving steadily. One afternoon, I came home from a client meeting to find her sitting at the kitchen table with Patricia, looking through photo albums. "Sarah," she called when she saw me, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Come see." I joined them at the table, and she pointed to a picture of me at my high school graduation, the ceremony she hadn't attended. "I was scared," she said, the words coming more easily now. "You were so smart, so different. I didn't know how to." She struggled for the words, but I understood. She was trying to explain something that I'd never considered, that my success might have been as intimidating to her as her rejection had been devastating to me. I thought, "You would leave and never come back," she continued. I thought, if I didn't get attached, it would hurt less. Patricia quietly excused herself, sensing that this was a conversation that needed privacy. I stared at the photo. Myself, at 18, proud and determined, ready to take on the world, and tried to reconcile this new information with the narrative I'd carried for 12 years. "But I did come back," I said softly. "I came back when you needed me." She nodded, reaching across the table to take my hand with her good one. "You're the best of all of us," she said. "I was wrong. You were always part of this family. You were the heart of it." I felt something shift inside me, like a piece of myself that had been displaced was finally settling into its proper place. The words I'd longed to hear for so many years didn't erase the pain of their absence, but they provided context, understanding, and a foundation for something new. As spring turned to summer, our household found its rhythm. My mother's recovery continued steadily. She was walking with a cane, speaking in full sentences, and beginning to participate in household activities in small ways. Marcus found a new job with a construction company that appreciated his experience and work ethic. The twins were thriving at their new school and had made friends in the neighborhood, and I was discovering something I'd never expected. I enjoyed having a full house. I liked cooking dinner for 5 people, liked the sound of conversation and laughter echoing through rooms that had been too quiet for too long. I liked being needed, not as a burden bearer, but as a sister, a daughter, a person whose presence made others feel safe and supported. We established traditions without meaning to. Sunday morning breakfast became a family affair, with everyone contributing according to their abilities. Marcus would make his famous pancakes. The twins would handle fruit salad and coffee, and I'd manage the logistics of getting everything to the table, while our mother offered commentary and encouragement from her seat at the head of the table. We started playing cards in the evenings, simple games that didn't require complex strategy, but allowed us to talk and laugh together. We watched old movies on Friday nights, sharing blankets and popcorn, like we were kids again, but without the tension and conflict that had defined our childhood interactions. It wasn't perfect. We still had disagreements, still triggered each other's old wounds, still struggled with the dynamics of adults who were learning to relate to each other as equals, rather than falling back into childhood roles. But we were building something new on the foundation of what remained from our old relationships. One evening in July, as I was sitting on my back porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My mother joined me. She was moving more confidently now, though she still used her cane for stability. "Beautiful," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "Yes, it is." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood, children playing, dogs barking, the distant hum of traffic. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced with her before. "Sarah," she said eventually, "I need to tell you something." I turned to look at her, noting how much healthier she looked than she had 4 months ago. The color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes held a clarity that had been missing for years. When I said, "Those words, about you not being part of the family," I was talking about myself. I frowned, not understanding. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was failing at everything. "You were so capable, so determined. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. So I tried to make you feel the way I felt." The confession hit me like a physical blow, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest in a way she'd never been before. She was acknowledging not just the harm she'd caused, but the pain that had driven her to cause it. "I'm sorry," she continued. "I'm sorry I made you carry my pain. I'm sorry I made you question your worth. You were never the problem, Sarah. You were never anything but wonderful." I felt tears sliding down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but tears of release. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen and understood by the woman who had given me life. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for telling me that." She patted my hand with her good one. "Thank you for bringing me home." As we sat there watching the last light fade from the sky, I realized that home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling of belonging, of being valued, of having people who would show up for you when everything fell apart. I'd spent years building a beautiful house, but it had taken my broken family moving in to make it a home. 8 months had quietly slipped by since Marcus's first unexpected phone call. That moment, which had unknowingly marked the beginning of a profound transformation in all our lives. What once was a peaceful, almost solitary refuge, my house, had blossomed into a vibrant, pulsating heart of activity. The walls echoed with voices, laughter intertwined with serious conversation, the occasional outburst of playful teasing, and the gentle murmur of shared confidences. Morning light streamed through the windows, casting warm golden hues across the worn wooden floors, while the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of rain lingering in the air from an early shower. This was no longer just a house. It was a home, alive with the presence of people who had gradually learned to embrace each other's imperfections and cherish their unique quirks. My mother's journey toward recovery was nothing short of miraculous. Day by day, she grew stronger, steadier, on her feet, her movements more assured. Where once her voice was fragile and hesitant, now it carried clarity and gentle authority. Watching her hold a cup of tea in her right hand without trembling, I felt a swell of pride mixed with awe. But what touched me most deeply was not the physical healing, but the rekindling of her spirit. She had found a renewed sense of purpose, a reason to wake up with hope and enthusiasm. Volunteering at a local literacy program, she dedicated herself to helping adults who struggled with reading, empowering them to unlock the worlds hidden in words. Her work became more than just an activity. It was a bridge, connecting her to the wider community and restoring her sense of belonging. One quiet evening, as we prepared dinner side by side, her hands gracefully chopping vegetables, mine stirring the simmering sauce, she confided in me, her voice soft but full of conviction. "It's amazing, really, how many people find reading so difficult. It makes me grateful for what I have, and it makes me want to help." Her words lingered in the warm kitchen air, as the gentle clatter of utensils and the scent of herbs simmering in olive oil wrapped us in a comforting cocoon. Seeing her in action with her students was like witnessing a different woman than the one I'd known before. Patient and encouraging, she celebrated each small victory with radiant joy. The first time one of her learners sounded out a tricky word correctly, her face lit up with pride and tears glistened in her eyes. I often found myself wondering what might have been if she had discovered this calling years earlier, how our relationship might have deepened, how much more light she could have brought into her own life and ours. Meanwhile, Marcus was unfolding his own surprising story. His initial forays into woodworking were humble, patching up a loose banister here, constructing simple shelves for the twins' cluttered room there. But what started as necessity quickly evolved into passion. The garage, once a neglected storage area filled with forgotten boxes, was transformed into a bustling workshop. The rich scent of fresh-cut pine mingled with the sharp tang of sawdust, and the steady drone of power tools became a familiar soundtrack. Now, he was meticulously crafting a dining room table from raw lumber, measuring and cutting with the care and precision of someone who had truly found his vocation. One afternoon, I stood beside him as he sanded the smooth surface of the table, the fine dust settling like a soft veil around us. He looked up, a faint smile touching his lips, and confessed, "I never thought I was good at making things. Always figured I was better at breaking them down." His hands, now steady and sure, contradicted those old doubts. The table before us was evidence of his newfound skill, dedication, and patience. I smiled back, leaning against the workbench as the scent of wood filled my lungs, and offered, "Maybe that's part of it. Understanding how things fall apart helps you figure out how to put them back together better than before." He nodded thoughtfully, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "I've been thinking about taking some classes, maybe even getting certified in furniture making. There's a community college program that looks promising." His voice carried a spark of hope and ambition that I hadn't seen in him before, a rekindled dream that was now within reach. As I stood there, watching Marcus work with such focus and passion, I realized how much we all had changed. Our home, once a place of solitude and retreat, had blossomed into a sanctuary of growth, connection, and possibility. And in that moment, a deep wave of gratitude washed over me, for the unexpected paths that had led us here, for the strength found in vulnerability, and for the shared journey of healing and hope we were now walking together. I smiled softly to myself, the memory of that lost, uncertain young man who had arrived at my basement apartment 8 months ago, washing over me like a quiet wave. How far he'd come in such a short time was almost unbelievable. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I told him warmly, feeling a surge of pride welling up inside. "You really have a natural gift for this." The way he'd grown into himself, discovering talents and passions he'd never known he possessed. It was one of those rare, beautiful transformations that made all the hard days worth it. Lisa and Laura, too, had blossomed beautifully in the new environment we'd all worked so hard to create. Lisa had thrown herself into her studies with remarkable determination, having finished all her nursing prerequisites with flying colours. She'd recently received the exciting news that she'd been accepted into the registered nurse program at Ohio State University, an accomplishment that filled her with hope and confidence about her future. Watching her walk through the house with a newfound lightness, chatting about clinical rotations and study groups, reminded me of just how much potential she possessed, Laura's journey had taken a slightly different but equally inspiring path. After much reflection, she had made the bold decision to switch her major from elementary education to social work. This shift was deeply personal, sparked by witnessing our family's own struggles and recovery process. One evening, as we strolled together through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, under the soft glow of street lamps, she shared her motivation with me in a voice full of quiet determination. "I want to help families like ours," she said. "Families who are fighting, who feel overwhelmed, but still have so much potential inside them. I want to be the person who helps them see what's possible, who walks beside them when they need support." Hearing her speak with such clarity and purpose made my heart swell with pride and gratitude. Both girls had found part-time jobs that allowed them to chip in with household expenses, something they insisted on, despite my repeated protests that it simply wasn't necessary. Their independence and sense of responsibility had matured beyond anything I could have expected. They had transformed from somewhat sheltered young women, hesitant to question their place in the world, into confident adults who understood both the privileges they had been given and the responsibilities they now carried. It was a bittersweet kind of pride, knowing that the world could be both harsh and beautiful, and that they were stepping into it ready to face its challenges. As for me, the experience of opening my home and my heart to my family had been more profound than I ever could have imagined. The business I'd worked so hard to build continued to thrive, but it no longer felt like the sole pillar of meaning. In my life, I'd learned to balance my professional ambitions with the deep satisfaction that comes from nurturing personal relationships. There was joy in both achievement and connection, a harmony that I'd long sought but only recently begun to find. It was a quiet kind of fulfillment, the kind that settles gently in your chest and makes the ordinary moments glow with significance. But perhaps the most profound change was in my relationship with my mother. Over the months, we had forged a friendship that transcended the traditional boundaries of parent and child. Our conversations had blossomed into something rich and varied. We talked about everything: her childhood memories, my career milestones, books we were reading, and plans for the future we both hoped to share. She had become someone I genuinely enjoyed spending time with, a confidant whose opinions I respected deeply, and whose company I sought out, even in moments of solitude. The walls that had once separated us had crumbled, replaced by mutual understanding and affection. One chilly Saturday morning in November, as the pale sunlight filtered softly through the kitchen window, and we sat at the table sipping coffee, each of us absorbed in different sections of the newspaper, I noticed her glance up with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Her eyes held a mixture of hesitation and resolve. "Sarah," she said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between us. "I need to talk to you about something important." I carefully set down the business section of the newspaper on the kitchen table, the soft rustle of the pages settling, filling the quiet morning air. The kitchen was bathed in the gentle glow of dawn, the pale sunlight filtering softly through the sheer curtains, casting delicate shadows that danced slowly across the worn wood surface. Outside, the world was beginning to stir, birds calling. Faintly in the distance, a light breeze whispering through the trees, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. It was the kind of early morning that felt full of promise and possibility, but also quiet enough to invite reflection. Turning fully toward her, I gave her my undivided attention. Over these past months, I'd learned to recognize the subtle signs when she had something important to say. It wasn't always in the words themselves. It was in the way her hands trembled slightly, how her eyes seemed to look right through me, as if searching for understanding, how her breath would hitch just a little before she spoke. That look was there now, and I braced myself. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," she said softly, her voice calm, but weighted with meaning. "About what comes next. What my life should look like moving forward." My heart thudded heavily in my chest, a fluttering mix of anticipation and unease. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and forced a steady breath before asking, "What do you mean?" She paused, looking down at her coffee mug cradled in her hands, tracing the rim absently with her fingertip. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her posture was resolute. "I mean that I'm truly recovered now," she said, voice growing firmer with conviction. "Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally too. I'm strong again. Strong enough to stand on my own without leaning on others." I could see the pride radiating from her, mingled with a bittersweet sense of farewell. The woman who had once struggled, who depended on us for everything, was now ready to reclaim her independence. "Marcus is getting back on his feet," she continued, "and the twins are well settled in their programs. They're growing, learning, and finding their own paths. Everything is falling into place." She lifted her coffee cup for a long, contemplative sip, the steam curling upward like a quiet exhale. Then, as if summoning courage for what she was about to say, she met my eyes squarely. "I think it's time for me to move out," she said, voice steady but soft. "To start the next chapter of my life on my own terms. To live independently, like I always dreamed I could." For a moment, I was silent. The kitchen seemed to grow still, as if time itself paused to hold the weight of her words. I looked around the familiar space, at the chipped paint on the cabinets, the hand-painted ceramic mug I'd given her last Christmas, the small potted plant thriving on the windowsill. This house had been our refuge, our safe harbor during the storm of her illness and our family's upheaval. The thought of her leaving stirred a strange ache deep inside me. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind. I wanted to argue, to beg her, to stay, to tell her how much we loved having her here, how her presence made this house feel like home again. I wanted to remind her that we were still healing, still rebuilding as a family, and that she was at the heart of it all. The idea of letting go was terrifying, but beneath all those swirling emotions was something else, an overwhelming respect for her strength, for the fierce courage it took to take this step. This decision wasn't just about physical space. It was about reclaiming identity, autonomy, and dignity, about honoring her journey from fragility to strength, from dependence to self-sufficiency. I let the silence stretch between us for several breaths, letting the moment settle like a gentle weight on my shoulders. Finally, I reached out and took her hand in mine. Rough, worn, yet steady. I saw not the woman who had needed me, but the woman who was ready to walk her own path. Looking deeply into her eyes, I smiled softly. "I'm proud of you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And I'll support you every step of the way." She squeezed my hand back, a faint smile breaking through the seriousness of the moment. "Thank you," she whispered. In that quiet kitchen, with the morning light wrapping us like a gentle embrace, I realized that this was not an ending, but a new beginning, one that we would face together, no matter where the road took us. But I looked at her, really looked at her, not just as the mother I had cared for over these challenging months, but as the woman she had become, a woman who had journeyed through a storm of despair and slowly, painstakingly clawed her way back into the light. It was as if I was seeing her for the first time, beyond the roles and expectations, beyond the struggles that had once defined her. She carried herself differently now. There was a quiet, steady strength in the way she sat, a calm confidence in her gaze, that told stories of battles fought and won. The lines on her face, once etched deeply with pain and uncertainty, now seemed softened by resilience and hope. Her eyes, those familiar eyes I had known since childhood, held a new depth, a profound sense of self that I hadn't fully appreciated. Before, they shone with an inner fire, a clarity that spoke of reclaimed agency, dignity, and purpose. It was the kind of presence that fills a room without saying a word. A presence that commands respect, not by force, but through quiet power. And, more than anything, what struck me was that she wasn't asking for my permission. She wasn't seeking approval or reassurance. She wasn't hesitating or wavering. Instead, she was simply informing me, stating a fact with a peaceful certainty that felt like a revelation. This wasn't a tentative plan or a fleeting thought. It was a conscious, well-considered decision, born from a place of calm resolve. She had made up her mind, and there was no need for debate or discussion. It was as if she was gently drawing a new boundary, announcing to me and to herself that she was stepping into a new phase of life, on her own terms. For a moment, I felt a complex swirl of emotions, pride, awe, and a bittersweet ache that tugged at my heart. How fast time had flown, how far she had come. The woman who had once been fragile and dependent was now standing tall and independent, ready to embrace a future shaped by her own hands. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before speaking. "Where would you go?" My voice was soft, careful, as if I were touching something precious. She smiled then, a smile unlike any I had seen in a long time. It was quiet, serene, full of contentment and hope. It was the kind of smile that comes from knowing you've made peace with your past and are ready to welcome what lies ahead. "There's a small apartment complex near the library downtown," she said, her voice calm but bright. "It's close to the literacy center where I volunteer, close to the bus line so I can get around without trouble, and close enough to here that I can visit often." Her eyes twinkled with a mix of practicality and excitement. "I've already spoken with the manager. They have a unit becoming available in January." Her words floated between us, wrapping the kitchen in a soft glow of possibility. The thought of her moving out, once terrifying, now felt like the natural next step in her journey. It wasn't a loss, but a gain, an opening toward freedom and self-reliance. I reached out across the table, my hand finding hers. The simple touch was full of meaning. The warmth, the familiar texture of her skin grounding me, connecting us beyond words. Her fingers curled around mine, strong and steady. A silent reassurance that we were still together, even as she prepared to step into her own space. "I'm proud of you," I said, voice thick with emotion. Every word was sincere, weighted with love and admiration deeper than I could fully express. It was a moment of truth, a declaration of respect for the woman who had become my hero, my inspiration. She squeezed my hand gently in response. A quiet thank you passing between us, an unspoken promise that no matter the distance or change, we would always be connected. We sat there for a while longer, in comfortable silence, the morning light casting gentle shadows across the table. The house felt different now, filled with hope and possibility, as if it too understood the significance of this moment. It was the end of one chapter and the hopeful beginning of another, full of promise, growth, and new dreams waiting to be realized. The following weeks were filled with a flurry of activity. We helped Mom downsize, pack, choose furniture. Marcus built her a handcrafted coffee table as a housewarming gift, his first commissioned piece. The twins organized a potluck-style farewell dinner that turned into a celebration of resilience, love, and second chances. On moving day, the morning air greeted us with a gentle chill that hinted at the last whispers of winter, yet carried with it the unmistakable promise of spring. The sky above was a soft pale blue, streaked with wisps of cottony clouds, and the delicate sunlight filtered through budding branches, casting dappled shadows on the sidewalk. We stood together outside her new building, a modest brick apartment, complex with weathered but welcoming charm, nestled on a quiet tree-lined street that seemed both peaceful and full of quiet possibilities. I wrapped her in a long, tender hug, holding on a little tighter than usual, as if trying to convey everything I felt in that moment without words. My arms encircled her with a mix of pride, gratitude, and a touch of bittersweet sadness. A cocktail of emotions that churned inside me, making my chest ache in the best possible way. It was a moment thick with meaning, the kind that marks a transition not only for her, but for all of us. "This isn't goodbye, you know," I whispered, my voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves around us, soft and shaky with the weight of all we'd endured and overcome. She pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, her eyes, still bright and full of that quiet strength she had reclaimed through months of struggle and healing, held mine with steady reassurance. "I know," she said softly, her voice calm, yet touched with a tender vulnerability. "It's just a new beginning for all of us." Her words floated between us like a gentle breeze, carrying with them a profound truth, and she was right. This moment wasn't an ending, steeped in loss or regret. It was a punctuation mark in our story, a deliberate, peaceful pause, a soft full stop at the close of a chapter that had once been dark and fraught with pain, but had blossomed into a narrative of hope, renewal, and redemption. I watched her walk toward the entrance, each step confident and purposeful. Her silhouette, framed by the morning light, I felt a swell of gratitude for her courage, for the resilience she had shown not just to survive, but to thrive. Her new home was a fresh canvas, a place where she could write the next pages of her life with clarity and joy. Spring had arrived early that year, and with it came a renewal that seemed to breathe life into everything around us. The world outside mirrored the transformations taking place within our family, buds swelling on branches, birdsong returning to the morning air, the earth itself waking from its winter slumber. Marcus, too, was embracing this new season with renewed purpose. He enrolled in night classes at the community college, his determination to build a new path shining brighter than ever. In the garage, now transformed into a cozy workshop, filled with the scent of freshly cut wood and sawdust, he launched a small Etsy shop, specializing in custom furniture. At first, the orders were few and far between, small commissions here and there, each one a test of skill and patience. But with steady dedication, his reputation began to grow. By summer, the shop buzzed with activity, and he found himself inundated with requests he couldn't manage alone. Recognizing an opportunity to give back and share his hard-won knowledge, he hired a local apprentice, another young man eager to rebuild his life. Their journeys now intertwined by chance and shared dreams. Lisa had taken a big step into adulthood, moving into a small apartment near campus with 2 classmates from the RN program. The independence suited her, but she remained deeply connected to home, returning every Sunday for dinner. Those evenings were filled with laughter and stories, tales of hospital rotations, unexpected challenges, moments of healing and hope. Each time she came through the door, I saw her confidence blossom more and more, her identity as a compassionate, capable nurse becoming clearer with every step she took. Laura, too, was finding her path. Inspired by the struggles and triumphs of our family's recovery, she chose to change her major from elementary education to social work. Her commitment deepened as she volunteered with a non-profit that aided displaced families, immersing herself in the lives of those who reminded her of our own hardships and resilience. During her final semester, she landed an internship that further fueled her passion and skills. The day after graduation, the organization offered her a full-time position, a recognition of her dedication and the impact she was already making. And me? I watched all of them, each one stepping into their futures with courage and determination, and felt an overwhelming sense of pride and fulfillment. The business I had built continued to thrive, but it no longer consumed my every thought or defined my worth. Opening my home to my family, embracing their journeys alongside my own, had opened my heart in ways I had never anticipated. I found a new balance between professional ambition and personal connection, between the drive to succeed and the need to nurture and be nurtured. That spring, our house was transformed. No longer just a structure, it had become a sanctuary, a place of healing, growth, laughter, and love. Each room echoed with the sounds of our lives intertwined. The hum of conversations, the clatter of dishes after a shared meal, the quiet moments of reflection and support. The air was thick with hope and the unspoken understanding that we were not just surviving, we were truly living. As I stood by the window, watching the world bloom outside, I felt a deep, abiding gratitude. We had faced darkness, uncertainty, and pain, but we had emerged stronger, bound by love and the fierce determination to build better lives. And in that moment, surrounded by the gentle stirrings of a new season, I knew that the best was yet to come. I learned to let go, not out of fear or because I felt I had no other choice, but out of a deep, tender love, a love that stretched beyond myself, embracing everyone and everything I cared about. This process didn't happen overnight. It was slow, sometimes painful, and at other times incredibly freeing. It was a peeling away of layers of doubt, frustration, and pain that had accumulated over years. Day by day, I discovered a new version of myself emerging, softer, wiser, more compassionate, and more patient. Letting go stopped feeling like losing something precious, and instead became an act of liberation. Liberation from expectations, from old narratives that no longer served me, and from the fears that had kept me tethered to the past. For so long, my life had been about survival, clinging tightly to control, bracing for the next wave of uncertainty. I had learned to endure, to manage crises, to be the steady rock for those around me. But true strength, I realized, was not in relentless endurance, but in surrender. Surrender to life's unpredictability, surrender to the flow of change, and most importantly, surrender to myself. This acceptance gave me courage, a courage I didn't know I had, to open my heart again, to let someone in, to feel vulnerable without shame. Slowly, I began to date again, stepping into a world that once seemed foreign and frightening. The first tentative encounters were awkward, colored by years of guardedness, but with each new experience, my confidence grew. I was rediscovering what it meant to connect, to be seen, and to see others. At the same time, I granted myself a precious gift that I had long denied: time. Time away from the relentless pace of work. Time to breathe. Time to explore both the world and myself. I took a sabbatical, a few weeks to step back from responsibilities and immerse myself in the unfamiliar. I traveled, not just to new cities or countries, but also inward, navigating the complex, beautiful terrain of my own heart and mind. I wandered through small, sleepy towns where the world seemed to slow down, inviting quiet reflection. I lost myself in bustling urban centers where the energy was contagious and vibrant. Every street I walked, every cafe I entered, every stranger I met added color and texture to the tapestry of my journey. Savored every moment, the smell of freshly brewed coffee in a tiny Parisian cafe, the sound of distant church bells echoing through cobblestone streets, the taste of spicy street food under a golden sun. I let my senses come alive in ways I hadn't allowed myself for years. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs with new energy. The salty breeze of the ocean whispered promises of renewal. Languages I didn't understand became a melody, a rhythm that gently pulled me into the present moment. I cherished the laughter of old friends, whose easy joy was like a balm to my soul. I embraced family members whose presence wrapped me in unconditional love, and I was touched by the kindness of strangers, whose unexpected generosity reminded me of humanity's enduring goodness. Yet, the most profound part of this journey was the solitude I finally learned to welcome. For years, I had filled every quiet moment with noise and distraction, afraid of the stillness that might reveal my vulnerabilities. But now, I found peace in being alone. I welcomed the silence as an opportunity to truly listen to my thoughts, my feelings, my hopes and fears. I learned to hold myself tenderly, with patience and compassion, recognizing that self-love was not selfish, but essential. This newfound relationship with myself became the fertile ground from which healing and growth blossomed. One evening, on a Sunday that felt suspended in time, I stood in the backyard, watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon. The sky was a breathtaking canvas of soft pinks, fiery oranges, and gentle purples, blending seamlessly into one another like a watercolor painting. A gentle breeze stirred the jasmine and honeysuckle vines, their fragrance wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. The warm glow of twilight softened every edge, making the world feel both tender and infinite. Marcus stepped outside, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. The warmth radiated through the ceramic and seeped into my fingers. As he handed me a cup, we sat side by side on the weathered wooden bench, the wood cool beneath us, yet familiar and steady. We watched in companionable silence as the light faded and the first stars began to twinkle in the vastening sky. The quiet between us was rich with unspoken understanding, a shared sense of peace, born from all we had endured and overcome. After a while, Marcus broke the silence with a question that hung in the air like a delicate thread. "You think this is it? The end of the story?" I turned to him, meeting his eyes that reflected a mixture of hope, curiosity, and cautious optimism. I felt a smile spread across my face, one born not just of happiness, but of deep, hard-won serenity. "No," I replied softly. "I think this is just the part where we stop surviving and start truly living." In that quiet moment, as the world shifted from day to night, the weight of the past seemed to dissolve, replaced by a gentle joy and a boundless sense of possibility. We sat there, enveloped in the comforting darkness, the cool night air mingling with the warmth of our tea and our shared journey. It was a moment of profound transformation, not an ending, but a beginning, a turning point where the story shifted from pain and survival to hope, connection, and the radiant beauty of a life fully embraced.